Assalamu alaikum everybody, this is Dora and we are once again bringing you a very mindful conversation today. We are joined by Aun Raza, who is a brilliant photographer. His work has traveled many countries and let's hear from him what his work is about. Today हमने इनको join किया है at the Alhambra Art Gallery where he is showcasing his amazing work, if I may say. So Aun, how did you start? I'm going to take you back to the very beginning. Photography, camera kaise pick kiya? How did you figure out that, okay, this is something that you wanted to do?
It was not something I started with. I never thought I would take pictures. I was just interested in observing and sometimes preserving what I observe. And one of the ways of that was drawing. Okay. So I started with sketching little things, little faces, quick sketches, without knowing how it would come across, without knowing what it could mean, but wanting to gather little observations. And one of the tools over time turned out to be the camera. And that also was not a natural shift. Mm-hmm. There was a time where I did not know if there is anything to see in a photograph, or what do you look for when you look at a photograph. लोगों के चेहरे हैं, लोगों के घर है, इस तरह की तस्वीरें, उसमें अच्छा ये वो शख्स है जिसको मैं जानता हूँ, या ये कोई ऐसा शख्स है जिसको मैं नहीं जानता. And then one day, one of my eventual photography teachers, my very first teacher, or I recognize him as my photography teacher, in fact, he pointed out a photograph at his house where there was a girl looking towards you when you look at the photograph.
Interesting.
And he asked me, what do you think she's thinking? And that was the first time I realized that there is more than recognition, more than representation in a photograph. And one can contemplate, because it made me contemplate faces, expressions, backgrounds, what else had happened before that photograph, what might have led to after this expression that the little girl had. And that's Muhammad Asghar, who was a fantastic person, a poet, a photographer also by profession.
So I might say that you have been creative from a very young age, right?
Might have, yes, or been wanting to find ways. And one shape of that desire to find ways was creative avenues. One of them was music, one of them was observation itself also.
Yeah.
Curiosity. Yeah.
And when you decided on photography, you took a very kind of a unique route, I'd say, with street photography. That is not much explored around here in Pakistan especially. What was the idea behind it? And also with street photography, you have very particular angles and very particular pictures that tell particular stories. What is the idea behind all of that?
It's actually much simpler than it might seem. It's the same desire to observe, to try to understand, to burn that curiosity. And the most abundant avenue for that curiosity is the street, the open space, the public space, where everyone is carrying their stories on their faces, in their body language, in the things they're wearing, in the things they're carrying, in sab ke beech mein.
And with street photography also, I've noticed, like in a couple of your shots, like majority of them, I'd say, they have a very melancholic kind of feel to them. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you kind of do it on purpose?
On purpose, as much as one can have a certain inclination on purpose. I mean, the inclination is a big subject. Why does one look for what one looks for?
Yeah.
क्यों एक ख्याल आता है? Why do you follow one direction? Why do you feel a certain way? So that's something complex.
Yeah.
I think we can do the psychoanalysis of that another time. But yeah,
Maybe.
it's one of the directions that leads to non-caricatural understandings of situations or moments or people for me.
And on the parallel, like you've captured some of the very, whether it's art, activism, you've captured like legends, I would say, of those fields. What is the story behind that? One side you're showing this kind of degradation of the society, of the city, and then on the other side you have all of these legends, giants who have contributed a lot to the society as well.
Yeah, part of that is connected to how I remembered this city and how I started observing what was missing, which is very easy to pay attention to. At least for me, it's very easy to pay attention to whatever is not right. But it takes a bit more effort to connect it to what else is around that is trying to heal it. So there is this counterweight that I, over time, made myself recall, which I had been observing when I was growing up in Lahore. When I was a kid, I was really full of wonderful people in my life, full of thoughts and exchanges coming from them, making me feel alive, making me feel full of brightness around me. But if you start looking for what's not right, you end up paying too much attention to it. But it turns out to be a choice also in some ways. I'm not saying that everything is perfect, but I'm just looking for disturbances. But it was one of those beginnings of street photography about Lahore, where the streets were not wonderful. The streets were with a lot of things going wrong, a lot of people in trouble, or their difficulties obvious in their circumstances, their beauty also in that troubled moment.
Yeah, like for very example, the pictures right at the back, if you could talk about them, they draw very close parallel to what we were talking about.
So that picture on the left is from a place in the walled city just outside called Tangewala Chowk, which is where there used to be horse carts. Tange wahin pe rukte the, sawariyan leke jate the. Is tango pe pabandi lag gayi. We stopped having them around in the city.
Yeah, they vanished.
So it turned into this monument in the memory of something we have cut out of the city.
Yeah.
And it's not something that a city cannot bear. कि अगर टांगे शहर में होंगे तो बाकी चीज़ें डिस्टर्ब नहीं करेंगी, सिर्फ टांगे डिस्टर्ब करेंगे. बहुत से दुनिया के शहर हैं जो हर तरह से मॉडर्नाइज भी हैं, लेकिन उनमें टांगे भी मौजूद हैं. उनको चलाने का, इस्तेमाल करने का, उनको रास्ते देने के और तरीके हैं जैसे कि उन पर पाबंदी लगा दी जाए. लेकिन ये जो चौक है, तांगे वाला चौक, this is a kind of reminder of what we have done to our physical circumstances. फिर इस तस्वीर में अंधेरा है पीछे. It's a walled city, लेकिन लोड शेडिंग हुई हुई है. और उसमें एक बच्चा एक पब्लिक मॉन्यूमेंट के ऊपर बैठ के अपनी तस्वीर खींच रहा है. So it's this combination of those reminders of how many things in what combination are shifting or are being taken away from us, and at the same time it's taking its own new shape. Now we have a public memory of this. At the same time, if you go there now, I would suggest you do, so turn it back into a visitable space. If you go there, that's how it turns into a visitable space. People, although locals go there, but people from rest of the city never think of these kind of historic parts of the city as worth visiting.
True.
But it's like a visit to the ruins of Harappa. It's the ruin of Lahore city.
Yeah.
Because now even the horse head is gone. It has been further deteriorated. Not just the presence of the horse cart has been torn off. It's also the memory of that horse cart is also torn off.
Makes sense.
But paired with that is a portrait of someone I admire and I respect and I've been moved and inspired by a lot, is Raza Kazim, who started the Sanjanagar Institute for Philosophy and Mathematics, Sanjanagar School for Girls, which is completely free for girls who need education but can't afford. He was a master lawyer, so to speak. He was a wonderful philosopher who summarized one of the circumstances that we live in. Just to quote him, he said that we have moved from an era of scarcity into an era of abundance. And there is this kind of condensation of thought based on this observation and study and understanding of life and people and cities and circumstances that these kind of people have to offer. But it's really difficult for most people to reach such people, to ever know about their existence even.
Yeah, that's true.
So that was one of those combinations of, to simplify one more time, to oversimplify the poison and antidote.
So photography often is considered to be either a representation of something, a recreation of something, or just a creative reflect. What do you think? How does it kind of translate your vision? How do you use this tool? Do you use to create, recreate, or preserve?
I would like to point out something that is, I think, worth mentioning. As you said earlier, there are very few street photographers in Pakistan. It's a less known, let's call it, art form in this part of the world. But if you cross towards India, if you go to Bangladesh, you have Pathshala Institute of Photography, which is one of the best photography schools in the world. Not in Asia, not in subcontinent.
In the world.
Yeah, in the world. And they have been producing excellent photographers. And it's a result of these few people exploring the medium really with a lot of effort, a lot of attention to what there is in this medium to offer or to work with. So it's not my original medium of exploration, but it turned into one of those mediums which is instant, which is very close to external reality, which is demanding of your mental solitude. Because when you're in a situation, when something's going on, naturally, you have to be just by yourself, to be as absent or discreet in that situation as possible, to let people be themselves or let the visible people do what they're doing without interrupting. So you end up finding your own solitude in the process. And that's where street photography ends up showing you life. Because when you're a photographer, you end up being really focused, or sometimes too focused on the instance. There is this Cartier-Bresson expression of the decisive moment, which most street photographers pay too much attention to, and they keep looking for some specific kind of interaction, something physical where something is frozen in time. And then over time you see that that's one way of seeing life around you. Sometimes there is nothing physically happening or or changing or there to freeze.
Yeah.
It's all already frozen or already melted or already burned. There, in those moments too, there is something to photograph or something to turn into an image that can speak on its own.
Yeah.
Compared to what you were saying, the documentation or pure representation, because the other side of photography in general is, no matter how you photograph anything, how you see something, a photograph will inevitably document that.
True.
No matter how
Yeah.
artistic your view is or how directed or specific your view is, the documentation will happen inevitably.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this series that I have here has the documentation that is automatic, so to speak.
True.
So the search was not to just document, but to build images, and that's where there is an interaction of a very different sort when you're doing a staged portrait. So let's call it that. For example, this image here with Raza Kazim, who was, I think, 88, 89 years old when I took this picture of him. And there is this conversation that started a while before this picture. I met him several times for the photograph. We talked about it and he understood, or better said, I managed to explain what I was looking for, why I was doing it, what I can't find on the street, and that I could find in him or in a photograph of him. And with that conversation, with that kind of understanding of each other's perspectives, we ended up placing the Sagarvina that he designed, bringing him to that position and requesting him to put it on the way he does sometimes when he is observing the Sagarvina, or the water-filled speakers that he has invented called Bhulle. By the way, if you can Google that, you'll see it's one of those rare special music output devices that he designed that should be talked about. So we ended up collaborating for this portrait, which is the case of all of these portraits, in fact. There is this photograph over there you'll see of Surya, where she's also not in great physical shape, but she understood what I was searching for, why I wanted the photograph to be taken outside her office in the SOS village lawn where children were playing. Why I wanted this big chair to be moved all the way into the lawn, and why it would add something to the image, because it's not just documentation or just representation, but also building an image that can speak for itself beyond the pure documentation. And the same thing happened with a lot of other portraits that you see here.
So I know this is a difficult question to answer, but any of your projects that have had major personal impact on you?
In fact, it's coincidentally this project that I've exhibited here, this series called Stray Hopes and Antidotes. And it's one of those formative experiences that I had, because when you're doing a lot of street photography, you're walking every day, you're looking for places or moments or situations to build or to talk about something or to construct, sometimes even an image. But in this case, I added the restriction on myself for the pairs, for the non-portrait pair, part of the pair, to keep it pure street photography as it will come across, but I would look for certain moments or certain combinations of elements that would have that meaning that I was looking for. So it's a street photograph every time with a mood in mind that I went searching for. So sometimes I would end up roaming streets of the city all day, not finding that mood that I was looking for. So this kind of approach meant I have to spend a lot more time, I have to spend a lot more effort, but meanwhile, who will pay the bills? And that's where there are certain platforms, or certain organizations, certain institutes which make a big difference by creating grants, creating photography awards or prizes or residencies. And one of them happened to be Quai Branly Museum in Paris, who gave the Prix de la Photographie for this project and
That's amazing.
helped me produce this series. And the series ended up being part of the permanent collection of Quai Branly Museum in Paris. And that became one of the reasons why the French Embassy and the Alliance Française funded the exhibition here in Lahore, because it happens often that there is something that as an author or as an artist or as a person trying to build something seems meaningful to you, but around the city, for example, in this case Lahore, which is what this series is about, and built in
Very
also
much in Lahore.
It would not have been supported in the same way here.
True.
So that support ended up making me a bit more free in my search. That support, and then that support from the Alliance Française and the French Embassy ended up making me put more effort to bring it here, because that's another kind of priority that certain institutions or certain platforms have. Otherwise, there would be organizations here who would want something more popular or more seen, because it's safer. It's to make people happy with.
More commercial.
Because that's what happens a lot here. That there is a certain understanding or a certain view of photography. Most common kinds of photographs people end up seeing here are a certain kind of pretty images, usually either from fashion or from landscape of a certain sort. You'll see a few cityscapes, so to speak, here, but they are not the same kind of pretty landscape with a mountain and a few flowers.
I've seen those pictures.
But not here.
Yeah.
So someone has to understand or to give value to this kind of work, and which would result in the production of this kind of work.
Of course, and that is, where we understand how important it is that international bodies recognize your work, and you have been fortunate enough to win a few. From here on, how does future look like for you? Do you plan on taking this show elsewhere? Are you showcasing anywhere else? Tell us about what future projects are in pipeline.
Yeah, this series about Lahore has been exhibited in several countries already, but not where it was created. So this is the first time it's in Lahore, and in after a few weeks, it will move to Islamabad, and then we'll see how it goes. And apart from that, there is a series I'm working on in Austria about iconic Austrian visual culture, and there are certain iconic images which a lot of you might know already. One of them is the Venus von Willensdorf, this little deity that was discovered, considered one of the oldest female deity sculptures discovered, around 30,000 year old or 25,000 year old. That was a part of Austria where it was discovered. So it's called Venus of Willensdorf. Von means off. So I found a Venus von Pulkau, which is a little village where I found a beetroot that looks like Venus sculpture, the original one. So I photographed that beetroot in that mood, in that form. Then I photographed an aubergine, a brinjal, a bangan. Because it had the mustaches of Franz Joseph, the Austro-Hungarian Empire.
I saw that series of yours.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
very interesting.
So that's something that I've started working on, and it's one more time it's supported by the Austrian culture, Ministry of Culture. So there are these kind of state bodies that support these kind of projects that makes a difference for photographers who are working in their own direction, in an artistic direction compared to a purely commercial direction. And that's something I think could be built here.
Well, let's hope so. Fingers crossed. Well, thank you so much, Aun, for taking out time from your busy day and your display. And I wish you all the best. And I hope you had a good time with us. And until next time, thank you so much.